So why did you feel the need to kill any of the girls? Pardon?
I don't know. Well, I'm misanthropic. I don't have much time for the human race.
Human beings come in all shades, but perhaps the most disturbing people to ever walk the earth are cannibals, like this guy. This is Stephen Griffiths, the notorious crossbow cannibal. He was responsible for the deaths and dismemberment of 3 women. After his last murder, knowing he'd been caught on CCTV, he walked up to the camera and gave the camera the middle finger, a clear sign that he was remorseless and not afraid to face the consequences of his crimes. If you're a fan of poetic justice, though, you might like this part. This cannibal ended up getting savagely attacked in prison by another inmate. Bet he didn't see that coming. Stephen Griffiths. Serial killer and cannibal Stephen Griffiths narrowly escaped death during a harrowing assault in his prison cell. A fellow inmate attempted to drive a stake through his chest, prompting urgent intervention from prison wardens at HM Prison Long Larton in Worcestershire. Griffiths, known for his heinous crimes of murdering and consuming the body parts of 3 sex workers, was discovered in agony, with witnesses describing a gaping hole in his chest. The attacker was swiftly subdued, and Griffiths was swiftly transported to the hospital for emergency treatment. Eyewitnesses recount the assailant wielding a sharpened piece of wood with relentless force, aimed directly at Griffiths' chest. This chilling incident raises questions about Griffiths' notoriety and the dangers lurking within the prison walls. So who is Stephen Griffiths? Griffiths was born on December 24, 1969, as the firstborn child of Stephen Griffiths, a hard-working salesman in the frozen food industry, and Moira Dewhurst, who maintained a job as a telephonist. Little did anyone suspect, Moira concealed a darker side, operating as a covert con artist, ultimately facing the consequences of her fraudulent actions with a conviction. The family unit fractured when Griffiths reached the tender age of 13, as his parents endured a tumultuous divorce. Despite Moira's troubled past and criminal record, Griffiths and his siblings found themselves in her custody. However, their home life was far from ordinary. Griffiths developed a disturbing habit of secretly observing his mother having sex with multiple partners in their garden, an experience likely leaving a profound psychological imprint. As Griffiths navigated his teenage years, he veered into a path of delinquency, frequently resorting to petty theft. One particular incident turned violent when Griffiths assaulted a clerk and slashed his face with a knife when the clerk attempted to thwart his criminal activity, leading to his arrest and subsequent 3-year sentence in youth custody, all while he was just 17 years old. Behind bars, Griffiths became increasingly isolated from his family, confiding in probation officers and psychiatrists about his unsettling fantasies of becoming a serial killer. A year following his initial arrest, Griffiths emerged from confinement and established residence in a flat in Manningham, where he embarked on studies in psychology at Bradford College, thus embarking on his enigmatic journey into the intricacies of the human mind. In 1989, Griffiths faced consequences once again, this time receiving a sentence of 100 hours of community service after authorities discovered an air pistol in his possession. It was revealed that Griffiths had been using the pistol to shoot birds, followed by dissecting them, showcasing disturbing behavior from an early age. The following year brought further trouble when he was apprehended for holding a knife to a young girl's throat, an act that resulted in a 2-year prison sentence. Following his release, Griffiths delved deeper into his morbid fascination with serial killers, amassing a collection of books dedicated to their study. His focus centered on infamous figures such as Jack the Ripper, the Moors murderers, the acid bath murderer, and his personal favorite, the Yorkshire Ripper. In 1998, Griffiths embarked on a romantic relationship lasting 2 years, only for it to unravel when his partner visited his flat and discovered every surface covered in plastic, hinting at darker intentions. Subsequent relationships were marred by Griffiths' abusive behavior, leading to stalking and harassment that persisted for years, even after learning one of his ex-partners had suffered a miscarriage, carrying his child. This pattern of manipulation and violence underscored Griffiths' increasingly alarming descent into darkness. In 2001, Griffiths plunged into a downward spiral of substance abuse, turning to heavy drinking and drug consumption. Amidst this chaotic lifestyle, he acquired 2 lizards, peculiarly taking them for walks on dog leads. His behavior took a sinister turn when neighbor Rachel Farrington visited his flat and witnessed Griffiths feeding live rats to his lizards. Even more disturbing, Griffiths' former friend Billy Parkin recounted an alarming incident where he observed Griffiths consuming a live baby rat. Despite his disturbing habits, Griffiths managed to achieve academic success, earning a bachelor's degree in psychology in 2003. His thirst for knowledge propelled him to pursue a PhD at the University of Bradford a year later. However, unemployment afforded him ample time to delve deeper into dark obsessions, spending hours online downloading violent pornography and sharing quotes from criminals on his MySpace account. Among his disturbing online activities, Griffiths frequently referenced fictional killers like Francis Dolarhyde from Thomas Harris's Red Dragon, adopting the username Ven Pariah, a nod to figures from demonology. Unable to suppress his depraved urges, Griffiths made a fateful decision to embark on a path of serial killing, targeting prostitutes in the Bradford area as a twisted homage to Peter William Sutcliffe, who infamously committed similar atrocities in the same locale. This marked the chilling inception of Griffiths' descent into the abyss of serial murder. The Yorkshire Ripper. Peter Sutcliffe, born on the 2nd of June 1946 in Bingley, West Riding of Yorkshire, hailed from a humble working-class background. His parents, John William Sutcliffe and Kathleen Frances Coonan, were pillars of the local community. Kathleen, of Irish descent, was a devout Roman Catholic, while John, an active member of the Anglican church choir at St. Wilfrid SS, imparted a sense of spirituality to their children. Despite their differing religious affiliations, the Sutcliffe household embraced Kathleen's Catholic faith, with Peter briefly serving as an altar boy during his formative years. As Peter entered adolescence, signs of a troubled psyche emerged. He harbored an increasing fixation on voyeurism, spending unsettling amounts of time observing the activities of prostitutes and their clientele. Shy and withdrawn, Peter's departure from formal education at age 15 marked the beginning of a series of menial occupations. Notably, he undertook the grim role of a gravedigger at Bingley Cemetery, a job that left an indelible mark on his psyche. Colleagues recounted Peter's morbid sense of humor, a trait seemingly nurtured by his proximity to death. Between November 1971 and April 1973, Peter found employment at the Baird television factory, contributing to the packaging line. However, his tenure was short-lived, as he was soon summoned to assume the role of a traveling salesman, beckoning a pivotal shift in his professional trajectory. After departing from Baird television, Sutcliffe transitioned to night shifts at the Britannia Works of Anderton International in April 1973. However, in February 1975, seeking a change, he opted for redundancy and utilized half of his £400 payoff to undergo training as a heavy goods vehicle (HGV) driver. This career shift seemed promising until the 5th of March 1976, when Sutcliffe faced dismissal due to the theft of used tires. Following this setback, he grappled with unemployment until October 1976, when he secured a position as an HGV driver for T&WH Clark Holdings Limited, situated on the Canal Road Industrial Estate in Bradford. During his youth, there were speculations that Sutcliffe engaged the services of prostitutes, with rumors suggesting a sour experience involving a con by a prostitute and her pimp. While some analyses contest his direct involvement with prostitutes, they acknowledge his intense preoccupation with them, often observed loitering and observing their activities in the streets of Leeds and Bradford. In a fateful encounter, Sutcliffe crossed paths with 16-year-old Sonia Surma at the Royal Standard pub on Manningham Lane in Bradford's red light district on the 14th of February 1967. Their relationship blossomed, culminating in marriage on the 10th of August 1974. Sonia, of Ukrainian and Polish descent, hailed from a family of refugees from Czechoslovakia. Tragically, Sonia's aspirations of becoming a teacher were dashed when she was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Their marital dynamics, as described by writer Gordon Byrne, painted a picture of a domineering Sonia, often resorting to physical aggression towards her husband, who found himself in the challenging role of restraining her during her frequent outbursts of rage. Sonia had several miscarriages, and they were informed that she would not be able to have children. Undeterred, she eventually resumed her teacher training course. During this period, she had an affair with an ice cream van driver. Despite the challenges, Sonia completed the course in 1977 and began teaching. Together, she and Sutcliffe used her salary to buy a house at 6 Garden Lane in Heaton, into which they moved on the 26th of September 1977, and where they were living at the time of Sutcliffe's arrest. Sutcliffe's modus operandi initially targeted women and girls in residential areas, but he later shifted his focus to red light districts, drawn by the vulnerability of prostitutes and what he perceived as a lax attitude from law enforcement regarding their safety. His capture came after a routine police stop in Sheffield for driving with false number plates in January 1981, leading to his transfer to the custody of West Yorkshire Police, where he was questioned about the string of killings. Sutcliffe admitted to the crimes, claiming he was on a divine mission to rid the streets of prostitutes, guided by what he believed to be the voice of God. During his trial, Sutcliffe pleaded not guilty to murder on grounds of diminished responsibility, yet he was convicted by a majority verdict. Subsequent to his conviction, Sutcliffe adopted his mother's maiden name, Coonan, perhaps in an attempt to distance himself from the infamy of his true identity. The hunt for Sutcliffe was one of the largest and most expensive manhunts in all of British history. West Yorkshire Police came under heavy scrutiny for their lack of readiness in handling an investigation of this magnitude. It marked one of the largest-scale investigations ever undertaken by a British police force and took place before the widespread use of computer technology. Suspect information was manually documented on handwritten index cards, posing significant challenges in organization, access, and data management. The absence of a digital database exacerbated the difficulties for officers who struggled with information overload within the cumbersome manual system. Despite undergoing 9 rounds of questioning, Sutcliffe's case file remained confined to paper records, hindering effective cross-referencing and analysis. Furthermore, the inundation of documents resulting from televised appeals for information only worsened the situation. The 1982 Byford Report, which scrutinized the investigation, highlighted the shortcomings of the major incident room. It criticized the inefficiency of the manual indexing system, which failed to link crucial pieces of information, allowing Peter Sutcliffe to evade capture repeatedly. This systemic flaw significantly impeded the Ripper investigation's effectiveness, undermining its role as the central nerve center of the operation. Chief Constable Ronald Gregory of Oldfield's decision to lead the inquiry drew sharp criticism from Byford, who argued against the traditional inclination to select a leader based solely on seniority or tenure. Appointing a senior man based on age or service should be avoided. What's crucial is finding an officer with robust professional competence capable of instilling confidence and loyalty. Byford's scrutiny revealed significant shortcomings in Oldfield's approach, particularly his narrow focus on the hoax tape. Oldfield's failure to heed counsel from survivors of Sutcliffe's assaults, along with advice from numerous renowned specialists, including insights from the FBI and input from dialect analysts Stanley Ellis and Jack Windsor Lewis, underscored a critical lapse in judgment. These experts were unequivocal in their assertion that Wareside Jack was a hoaxer. The investigation's misstep was glaring. It treated the hoax tape merely as a means of exclusion rather than a potential lead, allowing Sutcliffe to evade scrutiny due to a mismatch with the presumed profile of the sender. Notably, the credibility granted to the Wareside Jack hoaxer was a pivotal misstep, as forensic analysis of saliva on the envelopes he dispatched revealed a blood group identical to that found at Sutcliffe's crime scenes, a type shared by a mere 6% of the population. Humble, the perpetrator behind the hoax, seemed privy to details of the murders supposedly withheld from the public, which he had actually gleaned from his local newspaper and local gossip circles. In reaction to the police response to the murders, the Leeds Revolutionary Feminist Group orchestrated a series of Reclaim the Night marches. Their actions stemmed from a deep-seated discontent with the police's handling of the situation, particularly their tendency towards victim blaming, exemplified by suggestions that women should confine themselves indoors after dark. On the night of November 12, 1977, 11 marches unfolded in various towns across the United Kingdom, each conveying the message that women deserve the freedom to traverse any space without constraints, and that they should not bear responsibility for the violence inflicted by men. Amidst the frenzy surrounding the case, the police grappled with an overwhelming influx of information, much of it misleading, including hoax communications falsely attributed to the Ripper. Following Sutcliffe's eventual conviction, the government commissioned a comprehensive review of the investigation led by the Inspector of Constabulary, Lawrence Byford, which later became known as the Byford Report. The report's full disclosure in 2006 affirmed the validity of criticisms leveled against the police force, prompting widespread acknowledgement of the need for procedural reforms. Consequently, the report catalyzed significant changes in investigative protocols implemented across police forces throughout the UK. In the aftermath of his conviction, Sutcliffe's name surfaced in connection with numerous other unresolved homicides and assaults. In March 1984, Sutcliffe underwent a transfer from prison to Broadmoor Hospital, following a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. Despite an appeal in 2010, the High Court upheld a whole-life order for him, ensuring he would remain in custody indefinitely. However, in August 2016, A ruling deemed him mentally fit to be moved back to prison. Consequently, he was relocated to HM Prison Franklin in County Durham that same month. Tragically, Sutcliffe passed away in 2020 while in prison custody due to complications related to diabetes. He was 74 years old at the time of his death. Griffiths becomes the crossbow cannibal. Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, would ultimately become an idol to Stephen Griffiths, who wanted to follow in Sutcliffe's footsteps, murdering sex workers in the same area. During the time of Griffiths, the crossbow cannibal, the laws meant that while prostitution was not in itself illegal, working in a brothel was. This gave a clear message to those who work in prostitution. You're on your own and out on the streets. The impact of this message resonated beyond the immediate community. Criminologists and detectives analyzing the case assert that it was precisely this revelation that drew the attention of Stephen Griffiths, known as the crossbow cannibal, to the Bradford area. Griffiths spent over a decade navigating Bradford's streets, cultivating relationships with its sex workers. He even went as far as relocating to a top-floor flat within a converted Victorian textile factory on Thornton Road, strategically positioning himself at the epicenter of activity. Observing the lax surveillance in the area and witnessing the escalating isolation and desperation among the women working there, Griffiths began meticulously planning his heinous crimes, exploiting the vulnerabilities of his victims within this marginalized community. In June 2009, Griffiths, then a criminology student engrossed in research for his PhD titled Homicide in an Industrial City, commenced his gruesome hunt within the grid's confines. Armed with a crossbow, he targeted sex workers, later dismembering them in his bathtub. Shockingly, Griffiths proceeded to cook some of the remains, while others he consumed raw. Disposing of fragments in the River Erie, he meticulously concealed his atrocities. This chilling pattern of violence echoed a similar spree in Ipswich during the winter of 2006, where lorry driver Steve Wright claimed the lives of 5 sex workers in an industrial wasteland. Griffiths and Wright deliberately exploited these desolate spaces, preying upon the vulnerable women marginalized by society. Empowered by the perceived anonymity of their victims and the neglect of these overlooked areas, they callously pursued their crimes, exploiting the ease with which they could commit such atrocities. Griffith's nocturnal excursions led him through Bradford's red light district, where he would meticulously select a prostitute and lure her back to his flat. Although specifics regarding the killings, excluding Suzanne Blamires, who endured both shooting and stabbing, remain elusive, it is widely presumed that Griffiths employed one of his crossbows to fatally dispatch his victims. Following their deaths, Griffiths methodically dismembered their bodies in his bathtub, occasionally opting to consume parts of them, either cooked or raw. The remnants of his gruesome acts were then meticulously packed into plastic bags and discarded into a nearby lake, erasing traces of his heinous deeds amidst the darkness of night. When Griffiths stood trial, the body of his first victim, Susie Rushworth, remained undiscovered, leaving a haunting void in the investigation. For his second victim, Shelley Armitage, only fragments including shoulders, vertebrae, and connective tissue had been recovered. Similarly, Suzanne Blamires, his third victim, suffered the same fate of dismemberment, with a mere 81 fragments of her remains retrieved by authorities. Regrettably, amidst the sensationalized coverage of the case, the focus shifted predominantly to the perpetrators rather than the victims or their grieving families. The plight of these women, both in life and in death, often went unnoticed, overshadowed by the lurid details of the crimes. In the past, the sex workers in the area lived relatively comfortable lives, with decent homes, possessions, and attire. Their evenings were spent working diligently from 7 p.m. to midnight, catering to their pimps' demands to provide for themselves and their families. Lum Lane, the epicenter of Bradford's red light district at the time, served as a gathering point for these women, offering a semblance of community and protection within its tight-knit enclave. Despite their semblance of security, the sex workers in the area remained vigilant. Just a few streets away resided Peter Sutcliffe, the infamous Yorkshire Ripper, who commenced his reign of terror against local sex workers in 1975. Over the course of 5 harrowing years, Sutcliffe claimed the lives of 13 women and left 7 others wounded, with the majority being sex workers. Upon combing through Griffith's residence, authorities stumbled upon materials indicating his admiration for Sutcliffe, suggesting an unsettling obsession with replicating his gruesome spree. By the mid-1990s, West Yorkshire police, plagued by accusations of incompetence in apprehending Sutcliffe despite numerous encounters with him, faced additional criticism from Lum Lane residents. Complaints flooded in concerning the proliferation of curb crawlers and discarded condoms in the area. Consequently, the authorities gradually relocated the sex workers to industrial zones, a move aimed at mitigating both the dangers they faced and the disturbances within the community. The women's new territories were secluded, drawing in dangerous men like Kenneth Valentine, who resided in Soho Mills on Thornton Road. He rented his room to displaced sex workers from Lum Lane for a mere £5 per session. Secretly, Valentine spied on them through a hole he had drilled in the wall, exemplifying the predatory nature lurking in these remote areas. Things took a really dark one night in 1996 when he raped and killed Caroline Creevy, a 25-year-old sex worker who had rejected his direct advances. Kenneth Valentine, characterized as a solitary figure with a propensity for violence, had a troubled past, as indicated by a detective closely associated with the murder investigation. With a substantial portion of his adulthood spent incarcerated for various violent offenses and theft, including manslaughter and robbery, Valentine exhibited a consistent pattern of aggression. Police surmise that his violent tendencies escalated following Caroline's rejection of his advances. Raised in Colne and residing in the area until the early 1980s, Valentine later relocated to West Yorkshire. Notably, he underwent a significant change just 5 days before his arrest for the murder of Caroline Creevy, altering his surname from NS to Valentine and dyeing his hair blonde. These alterations hint at a calculated effort to obscure his identity, possibly motivated by a desire to evade detection and accountability for his heinous actions. Valentine's past convictions, including the manslaughter of a girl he sexually assaulted in 1991, painted a disturbing portrait of a dangerous individual, described by law enforcement as someone who seized opportunities to commit violence. Close scrutiny of Valentine's actions was not limited to law enforcement. His neighbor Stephen Griffiths, who had also relocated to Soho Mills prior to the murder and remained there even after its renaming to Homefield Court in an attempt to distance himself from the crime's stigma, had been observing Valentine closely. Creevy's murder foreshadowed the gruesome killing and dismemberment that Griffiths would later perpetrate within the same building. Then, in April 2001, the disappearance of Becky Hall, a 19-year-old sex worker grappling with a heroin addiction, sent shockwaves through the community. After 13 agonizing days, her naked body was discovered, bludgeoned behind a low wall in an unlit car park on Thornton Street. Her child-sized C&A clothes were strewn around, alongside used condoms, painting a chilling scene of violence. Subsequently, in June 2009, Susie Rushworth also vanished, further deepening the sense of dread and unease in the area. As a result of heightened awareness, sex workers in the area became increasingly vigilant, attempting to discern potential threats among their clientele. However, as many may recall, Griffiths did not fit the stereotype of a typical killer. Nearly a decade following the disappearance of Becky Hall, another tragic incident unfolded. Shelley Armitage, a familiar presence on the grid at 31 years old, was well known to the community. Described as a confident individual with aspirations of pursuing a modeling career, Shelley's disappearance sent shockwaves through the area. Last seen alive on Rebecca Street on the evening of April 26, 2010, engaging in a discussion with a passing motorist regarding potential business, Shelley battled a heroin addiction since the age of 16. In contrast to her peers who charged £30 for full services, Shelley's willingness to accommodate clients for £20 made her a preferred choice, highlighting the complexities and vulnerabilities faced by those engaged in street-based sex work. Among the influx of newcomers to the grid, Shelley, like many others, found herself supporting dependent boyfriend, their existence tethered to her ability to procure funds for drugs. Together, they inhabited a modest flat in Allerton, a desolate suburb of Bradford. Accustomed to Shelley's erratic lifestyle, it took several days for her boyfriend to express concern to authorities. With news circulating of 2 missing girls, a sense of unease pervaded the community. Yet the business of sex work persisted despite the looming threat of a serial killer. Just under a month passed and the grid seemed to quieten. Still, there was no sign of Shelley. Shelley had a best friend, Suzanne Blamires, who was still on the streets. Suzanne, 36, was always a mess, according to sources. She was often drunk and stumbled around. She had been battered and raped by a gang. Suzanne's resilience was evident as she brushed off the horrors, masking her pain with alcohol-induced oblivion, only to rise again each night, battered but undeterred. Much like her friend Shelley, Suzanne's last sighting was near Sunbridge Road in the early hours of May 22, 2010. Concern mounted when her boyfriend, having not seen her for 3 days, reached out to Suzanne's mother in Rose, a middle-class suburb of Bradford. Upon learning that Nikki Blamires hadn't heard from Suzanne in weeks, The family promptly alerted the authorities. Mr. McLean, heading West Yorkshire Police's Homicide and Major Inquiry Team, HMET, received the call while at home with his family in Shipley. It was a pivotal moment, as they now confronted the grim reality of a serial killer operating within their jurisdiction. As Mr. McLean emphasized, a missing prostitute invariably intensified the urgency and stakes for West Yorkshire Police, underscoring the heightened gravity of the situation and the imperative to swiftly apprehend the perpetrator. The aftermath of the unsuccessful Ripper inquiry spurred significant changes within the policing system. Among these reforms was the establishment of a dedicated vice squad, to which the young McLean found himself assigned. Additionally, the implementation of the Home Office Large Major Inquiry System, HOMS, a sophisticated computerized database developed collaboratively between West Yorkshire Police and IT experts, revolutionized investigative procedures. However, while law enforcement underwent a transformation, the plight of street-based sex workers remained unchanged, prompting McLean's resolve to enhance their welfare. The tragic murder of Becky Hall struck a chord with him, particularly considering her youth and status as a single mother with a 3-month-old infant. Recalling his disappointment at the lack of public response even after appearing on BBC's Crime Watch, McLean lamented the disregard for the lives of these vulnerable individuals, lamenting, "No one cared about a dead prostitute." With an escalating number of sex workers reported missing, McLean's team intensified their efforts. Concurrently searching DNA databases and sex offenders registers, their endeavors were interrupted by yet another harrowing incident: a rape gang's vicious assault on a 20-year-old woman, leaving her traumatized and robbed. The investigation received a crucial breakthrough, averting potential stagnation. Peter G., the caretaker at Homefield Court, made a distraught call on Monday at 1 p.m. Upon reviewing footage from private security cameras, he made a chilling discovery: a woman fleeing from apartment number 33 in the early hours of May 22nd, followed by a man who violently subdued her. The assailant then shot her twice at close range with a crossbow before dragging her back into the flat. This pivotal evidence provided investigators with a crucial lead, shedding light on the brutal events surrounding the victim's demise. Subsequently, the perpetrator, aware of the surveillance, brazenly approached the camera once more, this time defiantly brandishing the crossbow and then giving the camera the middle finger. Over the following hours, he was captured on video multiple times, exiting the flat with black bin bags and holdalls. Sergeant Helen Metcalf, leading Bradford's Vice Squad, swiftly identified the victim as Suzanne Blamires. Detectives focused their attention on Griffiths, a long-term resident of Homefield Court with a history of violence towards former partners. Further damning evidence emerged when detectives found footage on Griffiths' computer. It depicted a naked, bound woman in his bathtub, with the disturbing phrase "my sex slave" spray-painted on her back. Metcalf positively identified the victim as Shelley Armitage. Griffiths was subsequently convicted and sentenced to 3 life terms. Despite his incarceration, haunting images of Becky Hall's battered body continue to torment him. Alongside the unsolved murder of Becky Hall, Yorkshire detectives have active investigations into the deaths of at least 6 other slain sex workers, highlighting the ongoing challenges faced by law enforcement in addressing violence against vulnerable individuals. During his time in prison, Griffiths attempted to take his own life on several occasions until he was finally attacked by a fellow inmate, an attack to which the motive remains unclear. Despite the brutality of the assault, Griffiths managed to cheat death. He will live out the rest of his life behind bars where he belongs. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to check our other similar and amazing videos on the screen. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.